Hello, hello, PeLatinos, ¿cómo están? Thank you guys for joining us today. This is your host, Victor Cornejo. Your other host, Mariana Fernandez, our beloved Peloton instructor, is trying to get on as we speak. I think we can offer her a little bit of grace. She's had quite a busy morning today, so I know she's trying to do her best to jump on, as well as Ana Lisa. So thank you to everyone who's joining the live. And then, of course, for all of our guests, this will be recorded as well. And so we'll be putting that out on all of our channels, including our newly launched YouTube channel called PeLatinos. So pretty excited about that. Well, I am super, super pumped about this conversation, and just, it's a reminder of how cool our Latino community is. Estefania and I were chatting about it right before we got on, but, I've been wanting to talk about this topic for quite a long time. It's been on my mind. And now our community is so large that I know that whatever topic that we want to discuss, there's going to be experts that are part of our community, and a few weeks ago, I threw up that, idea of, can we have this conversation and have some of our members and, some experts from our community join, and like that, you guys popped up. So really, really incredible. And I'm really excited to get started with that. So to start us off, what I wanted to do is just give a couple of introductions on our experts. Let me first start with Estefania Vela Pinto. What a beautiful name, Estefania Vela Pinto. She's from Quito, Ecuador, and after completing medical school in Ecuador, she came to the U.S. in 2010 and completed her psychiatry residency at the Icahn School of Mount Sinai in New York City, and completed her forensic psychiatry fellowship at Northwestern University. She's currently delivering psychiatric care to underserved populations at Illinois Department of Corrections. And then Nancy Crespo-Richardson. She studied social and behavioral sciences with a focus on psychology, sociology, and anthropology, and minor in ethnic studies at Cal State San Bernardino. And upon graduation, she joined the Army, where she served as a medic for 4 years. She continued her studies in counseling, psychology, and marriage and family therapy at Central Texas A&M. And she's now a licensed professional counselor and practice director at Nancy Crespo-Richardson Counseling Services out of Manassas, Virginia. So not only a counselor, but a veteran and an entrepreneur as well. Dang, I mean, aplausos. I mean, badasses for sure. And, and then of course, here on Sweden, we've got one of the OG Latino members from like day one. I honestly think he's maybe in the top first 10 of folks. And he's absolutely the most positive dude out there. If you need some motivation, go on his Instagram, follow this dude. I mean, he is amazing. And so thank you guys for joining us. And then we've also got the busiest woman in the world, Mariana Fernandez, has just joined us. Mariana, ¿cómo estás?
Perdón, sorry for the tardiness. I was trying to get it all in. Again, not tech savvy over here. It took me a few tries, but we got here. We arrived. So sorry. It's so nice to see all of you. Nancy, Estefania, Mark, hi.
Great. Ana Lisa should be joining here soon, but so let's get it started, right? Let's just dive right into it. As I was mentioning to you guys maybe a little bit earlier before we got on, I was sort of overwhelmed with the amount of information that exists about, Latino mental health issues, headlines about there is a crisis in that community. And I did come across, and I don't want to just focus necessarily on these statistics, but I found them quite shocking, to be honest, because I didn't have any idea about this. But I found that the CDC in 2018 found that Hispanics were 50% less likely to have received mental health treatment as compared to non-Hispanic whites. That was pretty intense for me. And these two really floored me when I read them. But in 2019, suicide was the second leading cause of death for Hispanics aged 15 to 34. And suicide attempts for Hispanic girls 9 to 12 were 30% higher than for non-Hispanic white girls in the same age group. I was shocked, absolutely shocked. And, Estefania, Nancy, how severely underserved is our community in terms of mental health care? And I realize that goes well beyond, suicide prevention, but so many other aspects of it.
I'm a stats girl, so I'll start and then I'll let Estefania go too. So if that's okay. I also looked at the stats and let's just start with the numbers, like you were saying. In 2019, the Department of Labor released the report that 6.1% of therapists were of Latina or identified as Latina. 6.1% of all the therapists. So that doesn't even match the demographic of the Latina and Latinx, however you identify community here in the United States. Of the 100% of therapists, only 5.5% speak Spanish. So let's remember that speaking Spanish doesn't mean that they're of Latina descent. That just means they speak Spanish. So
Right.
in combination, right, you might find a therapist that you can identify with, just, because we might speak the same language or we might have similar origins, but as you and I all know, we are not a monolith. Our experiences as Latinas, Latinos, Latina is different. Our journeys of how we got here is different. Some of us are struggling with a bicultural, navigating ni de aquí, ni de allá, or identity, and so many other traumas that come with that. So to have somebody that just understands that, the number is already so small. And let's not forget that included in our Latina community are the indigenous peoples who don't speak English or Spanish. So that number is even significantly more smaller. So how do they even find access to those things? Add money, insurance, all these other nuances just to get through the door. Y ya no digamos el estigma. So I guess
Yeah, we'll definitely get into that. Stephanie, do you
Yeah,
want to talk on
to
that?
say a little bit of like what Nancy was saying. If you ever want to look up just basic information, there's a NAMI called the National Alliance on Mental Illness. Their numbers is basically any Latino between the age of 18 to 25, only half of them, if not less, get access for severe mental illness. And when I'm talking for severe mental illness, we're talking schizophrenia, bipolar disorder, anything like that. So it's incredible. We're really an underserved community, and I'm not even talking the undocumented immigrant part of the statistic, because I don't think there's much on that. And some points that Nancy brought up is there's a lot. I mean, the stigma, the language barrier is incredible. Thank you, Victor, for your introduction. I train in New York City. I train in Elmhurst Hospital, so that's smack in the middle of the Queens. And I remember my third year, I did a lot of like outpatient treatment. 90% of my caseload were Spanish-speaking patients that were undocumented, uninsured. And thankfully, with the hospital that I trained in, had services available for these patients. And it's like they're looking like, doctor, we need somebody who understands us, what we go through, the immigration process, the language, the cultural part, and how much that plays a factor in that role. So these numbers are really small, and you don't get people that understand us and what we go through, let alone Spanish authorities as languages speaking pretty broadly, but then you have Portuguese, Quechua, Nahuatl. There's no three, and it's really hard to get it.
Yeah, that's crazy. It really is. I didn't realize how few Spanish-speaking therapists actually exist. And I definitely want to dig into those other barriers and issues, but I did want to kind of set the stage. As a whole, do Latinos tend to have certain disorders or symptom or particular diagnoses that maybe index higher than for the general population?
In terms of the psychiatric diagnosis, normally for, if you've ever heard anybody, I remember my family member saying, oh, la abuela tiene un ataque de nervios.
Nervios.
Yeah, see, or nervios. So
Sí.
that's actually in one of our DSM-5, the diagnostic statistic manual for DSM-5 that we use to actually categorize diagnosis. It's there, and all of our tests have a 23-year-old Latino woman that comes with ataque de nervios, so you know that it's your token Latino case. But the majority of the disorders that you will see, especially in women from Latino descent, major depressive disorder, generalized anxiety disorder, anything around that realm will be probably a little more higher than you're talking about major schizophrenia or bipolar disorder and other diagnoses that are less known. That's where you'll probably see more.
Gotcha. Nancy?
I see a lot of anxiety, depression, PTSD It's just that we don't talk about PTSD. And like Estefania was saying, ataque de nervios, I hear a lot of susto as well, which is our words for PTSD. So I practice actually from a decolonized lens. So I try really hard not to put labels on my clients or put these diagnoses. But as I'm sure Estefania knows, like we have to in order for billing and in order for people to get care. If we do not give you a diagnosis, you cannot access care with your insurance. So that's what makes it another barrier to access.
So I have
Or
to.
the other
You
interesting
said
part,
decolonized, but sorry. I'm sorry.
the other interesting part that I was gonna say, sorry to interrupt, was that because of or therapists in general that don't know the cultural background, is they would come and say, okay, I'm coming have with these anxiety symptoms that might be culturally appropriate, but they might overdiagnose you with something else. And you might get treatment that you might not necessarily need.
Yes.
Yeah. So it goes the opposite too, because of the lack of cultural understanding.
Got it. Nancy, you just mentioned the word decolonized. Can you expand upon that? And just, I've never heard that in terms in this. Can you kind of help define that for us?
So there's a big movement in psychotherapy with BIPOC, Black, Indigenous people of color. We're trying to move away from a medical model that kind of wants in and out. We call it more of like the McDonald's of, mental health, trying to get people in and out. 10 sessions, we get you out. We're treating the symptoms and we're not actually treating the root causes. We've always had healers in our communities, and that's what we're trying to go back to is our ancestral ways with a lot of the medical knowledge that we have now. How can we combine the two while still staying true to our cultures and our identities? And I think that's what, addressing what Estefania was saying, because we have these tradiciones, these rituals, sometimes we get overdiagnosed with things because we have a spirituality that they do not understand. So I've had people when they're están de luto, when they're mourning and maybe they feel a connection, like even things like Dia de los Muertos, like it was so stigmatized and we were being diagnosed for seeing hallucinations, delusions, when really these are our cultural practices.
Got it. Wow, that's absolutely fascinating. Now I got to be honest. I've been wanting to talk about this more in depth with the community because it's come up in a number of comments, in our community. Mariana has spoken about it, within classes, and I'm fascinated by the topic of mental health and mental health care. But to be totally transparent, I've never been to a therapist. And my sister will say that I need it more than anyone she's ever met. And she'll proudly say that. I spend so much time with Brene Brown and Esther Perel. I can't even tell you. That's whose content I watch the most in my life. Right. So in spite of that, like intellectually, I know that it's probably good for me. And I don't know why I haven't gone, and I've heard things at the dinner table with my family that is openly sort of discouraged to a certain degree. I once had an aunt, and if my sister's watching this, she'll remember it. But we were talking about overcoming sexual abuse. How people are trying to overcome sexual abuse, and I'll never forget. It was like a novela scene where she kind of slammed her hand down and said, "Every woman has been sexually abused. You just have to get over it." And we were talking about getting help for that, and I was like, I was just like floored, shocked, and I didn't have an answer to that. So yeah, I'd love to hear about the stigma. Mark, even though you're the most positive person, and I don't think you've ever pronounced a negative word, and I want to hear about what you've heard about, how you've confronted that.
Absolutely.
I'd love to hear from you.
Gracias, Victor. Sisters, brothers, pleasure to be with you all and share in this space. Thank you so much. Gracias. Yeah, that's what stigma, especially for men, especially for our brothers, that we don't need to seek out that support, that help, because of that stigma, because of how we were raised, to just oppress it, to push it down, that you'll be fine, stop crying, suck it up, etc. Since we were little, and that stigma that exists is that we did not know how to ask for that level of support. And going through, teenagehood, adulthood, finding spaces that will just really break down those barriers of being okay asking for help, being okay to seeking out support, being okay searching for a community that you can lean on for that level of just a wellness, and specifically around mental health. And that stigma is real, specifically with Black and Brown brothers, that we just do not seek it out because of how we were raised since we were so young. And like you, but being around stories time and time again from youth, that we just don't talk about it. That's something that as kids we don't ask about. And I remember vividly, can go on and on about stories, but really, as an adult, trying to really just kick down those barriers and really advocating for it's okay to really seek out support, seek out therapy, seek out counseling for whatever we are going through. So yeah, that stigma is very real. Absolutely.
Yeah, it was crazy. Very recently, I asked my closest guy friend, the guy I speak to the most. I asked him, "So how are you doing?" And I mean, like, but how are you doing? He's like, "No one's ever asked." And I said,
for me, it's you kind of like justify your anxiety, you justify your OCD, you justify all of these things, because for me, my mom was like, pray it away. Ay, vamos a orar, mija, y se te quita. And I'm like, no, like this requires some additional support. It's more than just praying it away. And we finally, my brother and I, have gotten to the point where we've talked to her enough, so now she understands these are like conditions. It's the same way that we get on the bike every single day or every other day. You need to take care of your mental health as much as you need to take care of your physical health. Those two things are not independent from one another. She has now gotten to the point where she's seen a therapist and she's like, why did I wait so long? I'm like, I have no idea, mother. You've traumatized me for half a century. Go, we'll pray it away. No, mija, vamos a orar. But she really felt, because of the way she was raised, her history, that we could pray anything away. El Señor nos va a ayudar, blah, blah, blah. But I'm like, no. And another thing is, we don't need to hit rock bottom to feel like we need to go out and seek help. Rock times you think, oh, okay, I'm managing stuff, but I feel like we're juggling knives. If anything drops, that's it, we're done. But you don't have to hit rock bottom to be like, you know what, I need to talk to someone to help me manage with my day-to-day, to help me be a better mother, to help me be a better sister, a better boss, a better employee, a better everything. Like, you don't have to be like at the bottom to seek help and to get better. It's just like working out. Like, you don't, I see it as like one and one. If you're taking care of your physical, you need to take care of the mental as well. And it's, I think a lot of people don't see it that way. So, yeah.
Wow, beautifully stated. I had not thought about it in the way you just expressed. It makes you a better person in all of the circles that you live in.
Absolutely. Because, you can't for everyone else if you can't be there for yourself first. Like, right. I cannot lift you, I cannot support you if I'm not comfortable with who I am. And that's very tough. And believe you me, I'm plagued with anxiety. Like, desde chiquita. Like, I remember vividly, I was like second grade. My mother came to school, and like, and at that time I was like in an ESL class, and I hear her talking to the teacher. She's like, vine porque esta mañana estaba muy ansiosa, and I want to make sure she's okay. And of course, I'm in El Paso, and 99% of the people speak Spanish. And I'm like, oh my God, my mom just came here and told everyone I have anxiety. And I'm like, to the day, no ha cambiado. Like, but it's how you need to learn to manage that kind of stuff. So a lot of these we have forever and a day. And you hear that a lot. No, es está ansiosa. Ay, es está loco. Is that whatever? And you kind of like hear those things over and over and over again. And you think that that's normal. And you don't think that you need to seek help for that. And that's just not the truth. That's not a reality. But another thing that I did want to bring up is seeing a therapist, seeking help. And I found this because my children are in therapy. Like, they've come in like for different things, and I'm all about it. I'm like, yes, let's do it. People think you're going to go see one person and that's going to be your person. And they're going to be able to help you, and they're going to be able to relate. But, as y'all were saying earlier, like you need to find that someone who understands you, who supports you, that allows you to feel heard. And yes, the diagnosis is important, but while you're in there, you want to feel like you're able to communicate with a person that you're talking to. That is key, because if you're going in there and you have the walls up and you have because you're afraid of, then no, feel like the people that cut my hair. How many people do you go to find the one you're like, yes, this is it? It's no different with a therapist. And what I found with my insurance was they give me that freedom to find someone else, because, finding the person that fits you and trying to find the right therapist, it takes time. But don't get discouraged if you cannot find one person on the first time. If you do, you're so lucky that you were able to do that. But for a lot of us, it's not the reality, and it's okay to find someone else.
Diana, tell us about the stigma behind therapy
Stigma.
that you've come across.
I think to Anna's point a little bit, but it's the going back and allowing yourself to check in with you. And that's what I try to bring a lot to, whether it's like you're doing physical movement or starting or having a meditation practice. It's a lot of that personal check-in of knowing, like, I don't feel okay, or it's okay not to be okay. It's okay to feel. And it was diagnosed with depression from a really young age. And it was just like, I don't know. I couldn't pinpoint a certain thing. Like, it was just like, I know that I don't feel okay, and why, and start to take the shame out of it, first of all, whether it's with anxiety or with okay, I'm having these feelings, like, I know, awareness of it, which, again, growing up within our Latina culture, a lot of times it's like, well, shut it down or you'll make it better. There's a lot of like, pray it away, swipe it away, don't be in your feels. Like, a lot of the things that we were told to just like kind of remove, that you can't just do that. And going back to the topic, especially for men, like, there's so many, like, you have to not cry, you have to not do this, you have to not. And so I feel like some tides are turning, and I'm seeing it with this newer generation, or how kids are being raised, of like these check-ins and kind of seeing, how are you? How does this make you feel? Because a lot of times, like, to your point, Victor, whoever asked you, like, how are you? Like, how are you doing? I mean, look at how that Elmo tweet like blew up.
Yes.
Because so many times it's just like, so even before the therapist step, even before, like, those are all parts of the process. But I think really giving yourself permission to just be like, what's going on? Like, if my runs are feeling really heavy right now, it's just like, what is sitting heavy? What am I grappling with that I'm not? Is it a professional issue, a personal issue, like an emotional, Mariana issue? And then, like, those being the building blocks to know that it's okay, that it doesn't have to be rainbow and sunshine, or you have to be strong all the time. Like, I just think that those acknowledgements and self-awareness, it's also important for kids growing up, or for everyone, that, because then finally it was like, oh, like, yes, let me go and talk to someone. Let me go. And even to that point, I come from a family physicians, and it's interesting that, like, both my father and my brother are cardiologists. Like, they take care of people's hearts. They are the ones in charge of. And even when I started telling them that I was going to therapy, they're like, oh, like, there was a little bit of a stigma with that, or just take the pill and you'll be better. Like, there's a breakdown in a lot of those conversations of the why, like, what is going on, and the lack of wanting to have that conversation. And not that everyone has to be like a vent session, but it's a self-awareness that has to happen, I think, first, to then move to the next steps.
Yeah, that's so interesting, because I've heard, like, I remember actually being told, if maybe I was down or I was quiet, es que está enamorado,
They label it like it's a label.
Exactly. It's ridiculed. And then that aspect of privacy, and it's funny how much my mother and father have evolved on this very topic, because my mother started working at a counselor's office, and she said, how could I have been so blind to this? But in that, this privacy issue, like when years and years ago, I remember having a conversation, and I said, maybe a therapist, and she's like, ¿Qué les vas a decir? It's like what are you gonna tell them that could possibly matter? It's almost like life continues, and you got to wake up in the morning, and you got to pay the bills anyway. So like, okay. And like my son, he's a freshman in college, and it's so funny because he called me one day and said, "Hey, Pop, guess what? I went to a therapist." And honestly and shamefully, I was kind of like taken aback. I was like, "What for?" You're doing like, what for? Like, and then I had to take a breath and be like, "That's good, man. That's great. Well done." He's like, "Yeah, it was just a great opportunity to talk to someone about kind of the pressure that I'm feeling right now."
But it's great you have that communication with him, that he feels that he can come and tell you very openly, like, hey, I'm looking at I'm talking to someone. For me, my kids were younger when they came and they told me that they wanted to talk to someone. And I'm like, great, let's do it. Like, que ellos sientan que tienen el apoyo de uno. I mean, that's priceless. It really is, because what would your mom and my mom would have said? Oh, pray it away. Oh, you're fine. Get over it. That's the thing. But for us, we are really a very different generation, and I think we're trying to do better for kids, with our spouses, with everyone else that is around us. And if you see that your friend is that, I'm sure that when you ask your friend, like, no, really, how are you doing? Le notaste algo que era diferente. Maybe you're like, no, I really want to know, how are you doing? And it's okay to ask those questions, especially when we have like our loved ones. And you notice that they're going through something, and letting them know, like, hey, it's okay to seek help. It's okay to go out there and reach out to someone. I know, and I'm on the university, shopping tour right now. And so many of them are talking about mental health and how they have health readily available for all these students, because our kids, they're going from, at least mine, it's second generation, but getting away from everything that they know. And I mean, that is very, very tough, and they have to learn to deal with all of that. And I think a lot of us, we had to internalize all the new things for us. Like, I was first generation here. I really could not go back and talk to my parents about a lot of the things that were going on. So having that safe space for them, I think, is outstanding. And yeah, a lot of schools, a lot of jobs, they're offering you something in-house. They are offering you, like, they're really understanding that mental health matters and how that impacts you on the day-to-day. So good for him on reaching out, but more good for him for letting you know. I think that's great. Yeah.
Yeah. I would say a little bit to what Mark was saying, like, los hombres no lloran, o no, los hombres tienen que siempre ser fuertes, no pueden decir nada, or that stigma that men have.
Yeah.
And sometimes right now, women too, and we learn this from our parents, like, oh, you're not able to talk about your feelings. You're supposed to always be fine, even in the Latino community. You're supposed always to be sparkly and happy and rowdy. It's like, no, it's okay for us not to be okay, in the sense of, I need help. Recognize when we need that help, and actually the first step is recognizing, okay, I'm not okay. Why you say that I'm not okay? And that's what empowers you to take, is like, I want to take control back on my life. Anxiety, depression, bipolar disorder, any of those are exactly the same thing as, I have high blood pressure, I have diabetes, and I need to take care of that. And the estoy loca, or la ropa sucia se lava en casa, you can't tell anybody else about the secrets. That's probably how we were raised in that. And it's like, no. God forbid somebody knows that you're seeing a psychiatrist. What are they going to think about? It's like, no, this is what we need to talk about, and why. So I think those barriers are getting broken now with the newer generations, which is a good thing. So give it a name and own it. That's why I tell normally my patients, own your feelings and talk about them. Yeah. That's when you're knowing how to manage them.
The secrets, God, and the fact that you mentioned the secrets. We don't even talk about the secrets in the family, let alone talk to a professional about it. Like, I mean, there's so many things that I have, so many questions that I don't have any interest in, that I probably won't ever get.
I did want to expand a little bit on what Mark and Estefania were saying about having to be strong, and go with me here. Cut our ancestors, our parents just a little break here, because we are the generation that has finally gotten a moment to breathe and realize something's not right here. Our parents, our grandparents, and those ancestors before us have been on survival mode for such a long time, from the time we were colonized all the way until now, to forced migration here. So they have been just trying to survive and give us a better life. Now, that doesn't make it okay that they're making us suppress our feelings now. But I think kind of understanding that it is scary when you have to open up. And there's a lot of things that they haven't opened up to us or to anyone else about it. And there's this comparison, like, I went through all of this. What could you have possibly gone through that, you know, you can't tell me, or that is so bad? So I think there's, I falta de psychoeducation, you know, even when we're talking about feelings, we don't have the language around that. You're asking your friends, how do you really feel? And I know when I show my clients the emotions wheel the first time, it's overwhelming. They're like, I didn't even know there was so many emotions. Yeah, pick one. Let's explore these, because people automatically go to sadness, anger, happiness, fear, that, like, your basic four. And there's so much more, empezando con lo más lo básico, in order to get to the deeper things as well.
Yeah. I'm so glad that you mentioned that, you know, and I have to jump in with that because it's a discussion I've had with my wife a number of times, in that, you know, one of kind of my own barriers to seeking therapy was kind of on the flip side of what you just said, in that I don't want someone to try to tell me that everything is my parents' fault. There is like a guilt and shame of, like, you know what? They busted their ass and they did their absolute best. And I'm a grown ass man at this point, you know, and if I just don't, because it would feel like I was, you know, criticizing them, and that just doesn't sit right, you know. And she's like, that's probably pretty, you know, happens quite a bit.
I'll tell you what, though, like for my son, when he goes, sometimes they just have those conversations. So I don't think it's blame in any way, shape, or form. Pero hay tantas veces que él me habla, and I might get emotional here, and he'll be like, you know what? She asked me to ask you something. And they're not saying, oh, well, it's obviously your mother because da-da-da. It's have the conversation of why, you know, something happened that might be triggering you, that may have impacted you. And when we have that conversation, at least the first time that we did, he's like, okay, I understand where you were at that point in time. Now I get it. And now I'm able to deal with that. So it's not about them, you know, culpa de mamá, culpa del papá. It's helping him understand what was happening at that point in time, what might have, like, whatever. And that it's just incredible. And we had that conversation, and I was at Ulta and I was crying because, you know, he and I'm like, you know, the fact of the matter is I'm a much better person today than when he was a little boy. Like, if I knew that, I tell my kids all the time, and this is maybe why grandparents are better than parents, because they've learned, ya de viejos ya saben más, and they understand more. I think that's why it's better. It's not because, oh my God, you know, you were awful with me. They recognized their faults, recognized their issues, and they know what they could do to be better. And I tell my son, I'm a very different mother to you than I am to your sister, because you guys are so far apart, and I learned so much through that time, that if you're not learning, if you're not growing, if you're not improving, then you're really not living very well. So we had that conversation, and he was crying. He was in the car. He was crying. I was at Ulta, and I was crying. I'm like, I can't even pay for this stuff. I gotta go. It's so good to have that conversation and to help him deal with the way that he's dealing with things because of something that might have triggered him that I didn't even know. Like, I literally was doing things, did not even think about that. And I was a young mom, and a lot of us, our parents were young parents that, I mean, there's no, you know, book on how to raise a child. We really are all just doing the best we can on the day to day. There's really no guide on that.
I'm so glad you brought that up. I'm going to stop you right there as a professional, just because I hear that all the time. And we talked about taking our kids to therapy, and I'm guilty. I'm a therapist that will not see children. And I'll be honest as to why I don't see children. I don't see children because the parents don't want to do the work. having children in therapy is a systemic issue, and we need to have the family system in therapy so that we can make it's okay to have differences of opinions and to go on their own, and not every session is going to be a family session, but to better understand each other and to pick up the tools to communicate. So how do we do that? The reason you're coming to me is because I hear it all the time in therapy. Los niños no vienen con un manual. Kids don't come with a manual. And I tell them, you're absolutely right. But there is thousands of books out there on parenting. And if there's a book that has changed my life, it was The Conscious Parent, because it taught me that I had to work on my stuff in order for me to be a good parent. And it also helped me understand where my parents were coming from. That doesn't mean my parents and I do not have issues, because we're in the thick of it right now. But, it helped me understand that. And it helped me heal myself while I'm healing my future generation. Y si por si acaso, I'm able to heal my previous generations as well. But I have to heal myself first. And I tell my clients, I tell everybody all the time, the reason I'm a dope ass therapist is because I wanted to be a good mother and I wanted to be a good wife.
Nancy, if I may speak to your previous point around trauma, and specifically generational trauma, that is real, especially in our community. My family has been situated in Phoenix, Arizona, when that was Mexico. And the traumas that they endured from segregated Phoenix in the 1920s, 30s, 40s, and what they experienced and passed on from generation. And to your point, not knowing what to call it. They know they experienced it. They know they were bullied. They know that they were, jumped and beat up, et cetera, for being brown, for speaking with an accent and not naming it, suppressing those emotions. And, whether it was the men or the women, having experienced that cycle. And then as us, this generation, creating the space for just to have the conversation that, Ama, abuelita, it's okay to talk about it. What was it like? What did you experience? Share with me so we can continue to educate future generations, to your point, because we know what you experienced was not, it was very much injustice and racist and segregated, city that we were. But what can we do now to help this system break these cycles, to educate what's coming behind us? So great point. Just wanted to echo that. Thank you for sharing that.
Yeah, it starts with psychoeducation and just having the language. Let's start, like I say, with the basics, having that language. I said earlier on the chat, our parents couldn't give us what they didn't have. And a lot of our parents didn't have the language for this. We just got the label of Latinos, of Hispanic in the 80s, right? So there wasn't even a language to what to call us as a community. So imagine racism, prejudice, stereotypes, those are words that have come out just, in the last, 50 years. So our parents didn't know what to call these things. And our parents didn't have also emotional intelligence because nobody taught them that. They were in survival mode. So we are now building this new conscious awareness of having emotional intelligence. And we're all babies in this struggle. We're all babies and learning to walk in this. Even myself as their therapist, I tell people hey, I'm learning too. So I think just giving ourselves grace, porque también once we learn something, queremos el cambio así. We want everything fast. And I'm sure Mariana knows, when we're working on a new pose, we don't get it. We see how it's done and we're oh, I see, I can do it now. No, it takes practice. Yoga is a practice. Mental health is a practice.
That's great.
And a little bit to what Nancy was saying, Victor, with learning, right? Our in the education of mental health, of what it is, how to recognize. You see that a lot of in our culture, there's a little bit what Nancy was saying, healers, how our faith actually is involved in this. And this might be a little bit of a sour topic, but certain faiths or certain, I guess, beliefs sometimes not frowned upon, but make it a barrier to go to mental health and to recognize these type of issues. And it's just education. You don't have to label it. It doesn't have to go against your religion or your belief, but we have to recognize that something is not right here. And if something something is not sitting well with you, despite what you're leaving, you start questioning a little bit and saying, "Hi, this is not fitting with what I'm thinking or what I'm feeling," and explore a little bit out of that, because I've noticed that can be oh no. I remember a patient that I had a first psychotic break, and unfortunately the family were thinking that he was possessed. and they were not wanting to get mental health. It was to the point of the kid, I mean, it stopped eating. It was a pretty sad case, but like, it was a lot of education to the family. I'm not negating your background. I'm not negating your religion, but this is something a little bit more than just. So it's a lot of education for people than to have see a little bit out of it.
Y también
Yeah,
lo que
that-
la gente no sabe es que, I mean, like the Catholic Church, before you can even perform an exorcism, the Catholic Church has psychiatrists, and they do a mental health check to make sure this is actually a spiritual thing, a mental health thing versus a spiritual thing, because they don't want to cause spiritual harm on that person. So I think there's a lot of things too that we don't talk about. Talking to your priest or talking to your pastor can be therapeutic as well. Sometimes we just need that space, like you were talking about, Victor, that privacy, donde puedo ir a desahogarme, to just talk about something and know that it's not going to leave this room. You just have to hear it in your outdoor voice instead of in here all the time.
And I guess Nancy, now that you see it, in a way, we are a way of a priest, because I have confidentiality things that I have to follow. I can't disclose things that my patients tell me, unless it's obviously danger to self or others, right? Otherwise, I guess, your 21st century way of priesthood.
Curanderas. Yeah.
I don't know how to put it. but-
Healers, they're healers. Yeah,
Healers,
you're
yeah.
healers.
Yeah.
So I think that inspires, something that I've been wanting to ask about, because like I am kind of worried also for this younger generation. While it seems to appear that there is more and more access to mental health care, there seems to be a lot of more access to misinformation too, and self-diagnosis, and TikTok psychiatrists and TikTok counselors. And, I recently heard a podcast where it's like, this generation, they self-diagnose 3 different syndromes at the same time because of a few TikTok things. And that's got to be dangerous. That social media obviously puts an enormous amount of pressure on young people these days. These images of fake success, it's got to be overwhelming. But yeah, this sort of self-treatment via TikTok, what have you guys seen around that, and how big of a problem is that?
It's scary, the misinformation out there. I know that there's probably a couple of months ago, there was this trend of like, everybody wanted to be diagnosed with borderline personality disorder. And I was like, kids, it's not fun to be diagnosed with borderline personality disorder. That's not a flag. Or it was either that or dissociative disorder, like what we call multiple personality disorder. And it's like, no, let's educate a little bit more. You have to be conscious of what social media is out there. And I tell my patients, I know you're going to go up and search. I know you're going to go Google, but at least Google from sources that are reliable, that are not random people on TikTok saying things.
Absolutely. I'm right there with you. I have people who come in and they show me the TikTok feed. I check every box. And I'm like, well, let's pull out the DSM. And even with the DSM, as we learn in school, you can find yourself on the DSM. We're all in the DSM one way, shape, or form. If you look hard enough, you will find yourself in there. Is it making your life more difficult? And in what areas is it making it more difficult for you to function and be a functional person? And that's, again, that medical model. That's not to say that you don't have some of these traits. And I have a love-hate relationship with Brene Brown, but she talks about trait versus state. We can be in a state of depression, but that's not our trait. That is not your diagnosis, right? So when it becomes personality, when it becomes something that's your day-to-day, now we have an issue. But we all go through depression. We all go through anxiety. We all have our moments que perdemos la cabeza, you know what I mean? And then how long do you stay in those states, right? And that's why having that psychoeducation of, frequency, intensity, and severity of how long you're in these states is so important.
Yeah,
I think it's a lifelong. Oh, sorry.
If you look, sorry, Mark, if you look at the DSM-5, and I tell these patients a lot because it's like, okay, I'm coming in anxious, and it's like, guys, I'm anxious on a daily basis. I'm sad, so let's recognize normal emotions first. It's normal to be anxious. It's normal to be sad. It's normal to be like the emotion wheel, right? All of those are normal. It's a spectrum. However, when you look at it, it's like, okay, now I've been sad, and I'm not functioning well at work. I'm having problems with my partner. I'm not going well in school. My grades are dropping. Or I don't want to go out and do my regular hobbies. And this is now going on for more than 6 months. Or, okay, that's when we say it's because it counts to your daily functioning. That's when we get worried. So it's not that, okay, I'm one day depressed and now you have MDD and you need to go to psychiatrist that's on with pills. No, it's a combination of
Yeah.
factors.
And
That's something important that we have.
it was interesting recently. I got to work with do an event with NAMI for their future generation leaders, and in the prep work with them, because I feel like the pendulum, again, generationally, they are so aware, they're so cognizant, and you have, it was really nice to see these up and coming young adults who were so on top of it and were taking on these leadership positions, but also to be able to speak to them, to your point, Estefania, like a lot of these terms are so easily thrown around now to the self. And so whether it's OCD or the narcissism, you start to see a lot of that. To your point, sure, there's tendencies, or you may feel like a certain type of way. I'm anxious too on the daily, like it's just, maybe it's New York City, I don't know. But on a consistent basis, like what shows up, and it was a conversation in that sense of like, all right, so that we don't just TikTok diagnose everyone around us, that we're so hyper aware that these things exist. Like, how do we still hone in and leave the experts to do the actual diagnosis?
And to that point, Maria, I just wanted to add, I mean, as an educator, firm believer in lifelong learning, and Victor, thank you for purposing by naming it, self-diagnosis and going to social media. But also, as we are on our lifelong learning journeys, we turn to YouTube and sources and to do the self-diagnosis, whether it is through a credible, credentialed individual professional, mental health professional, and I have that. Oh, that is me. Oh, wait, and going to sources. So just being mindful on how we're filtering, whether it is an influencer or a professional, just advocating, to seek a professional and ensuring that they had the credible sources, credentials, and sources that they're utilizing in their work.
And most of us can tell the difference between an allergy, a cold, and a flu, and we think we could self-diagnose. Well, might have the flu, no say. But literally, like, you have to recognize that these are professionals and that is their job. And go talk to them and don't be like, I think I have this, because no, they're going to ask you specific questions and indulge those questions. Like they're trying to get the answers to treat you with whatever you might need. My dad specifically, for him, any mental health equals que estás loco. No, you can't go because you're crazy. And it's not about that. It's learning how to deal with whatever you have going on. Like if you know that something triggers you, like something that I learned was counting. And I think we do it quite a bit, in some of the meditations where you're like, you count and you hold your breath and that helps so much when you're feeling like a moment of anxiety or a moment of whatever. They teach you all sorts of things to deal with, things that you might be going. It doesn't have to be a pill. They walk you through addressing and dealing with your emotions at that moment. And it's, again, the older generation that's always assuming what getting this care is going to be, but it is very specific to each individual person. Just like anytime you go to the doctor, every single care that you're going to get is specific to you based on everything that you have going on in your life. And I think that's important for everyone to understand. You're not always going to end up with a pill. You're not going to walk out and you're going to pill. They might give you the tools for you to feel better and help yourself through whatever challenges you might be going through.
And professionals get it wrong too. I don't want to say get it wrong, but I have to get to know you. I have to get to know you in order to see what's really going on. And I can't learn about your 18, 24, 65 years of life in a 1-hour session and give you a diagnosis, right? We get mad when the doctor comes in and out for 15 minutes. Y ya nos da, oh, tienes esto, right? And how many times do they get it wrong? And you live the whole life. You haven't even talked about your deepest, darkest secrets to anybody. And you want me to diagnose you with what in an hour? So I think it's also an evolving thing of learning yourself. And I know I practice conservatively, where we start more conservative and we slowly upgrade if we see that there's more symptoms over time, because I don't want to give you that pill right away. I don't want to have to refer you to Stephanie if it's not necessary. I think there's a reason. There's medication has its purpose, absolutely. But if we can treat it without, that would be great. Sometimes it has to be the reverse. We have to treat you with medication first, and then we slowly take you off. So it does take a team, and it takes constant communication. And sometimes that's the first thing you're learning on your first session of therapy, is how to communicate with your therapist.
Yeah, to complement a little what Nancy's saying is, I love when I get to work with a psychologist, because we work as a team, in the sense that I don't do necessarily the same that Nancy does, right? And I tell my patients, you're coming to see me, you're probably better off just starting what we call the least damaging or the least invasive. And it's therapy is going to talk to somebody. I tell them, okay, we're onions. We're going to start peeling layers one by one. It will take time. And there's some days that you're going to walk 2 steps forwards and 1 step back, but that 1 step back will get you there slowly. Now, when there's some biological models that, when you're talking about more serious mental illness, that need medication. And it's hard sometimes for some of the patients to accept the fact that you might need medications for a long period in your time in your life, but there's also ways of working with that.
Yeah.
So it's very much understanding, again, I'm going back to education, right? The more educated you get in your symptoms, in what you have, the more power it gives you. So it's working with all. Nancy had a set of skills that I don't have, and I probably have a set of skills that Nancy doesn't have. We complement each other, and that's the good thing. That's why people have, like, I would love to tell my patients, hey, here's a pill. I'm going to make myself millionaire because this is the happy pill for everybody and nobody has problems anymore. I would be out of business pretty quick. So therapy is work. The patients also have to put work in it, and otherwise you're not going to make.
What's so crazy that you have all of mentioned education, learning education about having the ability to express these things, but you don't get emotion or therapy class in high school. You got to become a full ass adult, dealing with some stuff before you even maybe have the discussion about seeing a therapist.
Well, you say that, but now elementary schools are kind of implementing that. Middle schools are implementing that. My daughter just had a wellness day this Wednesday, where, I mean, literally, they're addressing this now. Like, we didn't have that, and I think this is why the next generation is going to be so much better, because now they're starting a lot younger. They understand the importance. Just like they have PE, you need to have a mental wellness day as well, where you have different speakers come in. And at the different ages, it's amazing. My daughter goes to a school that goes from 6th grade to a senior, and they separate these classes because obviously what a 6th, 7th grader might be going through is a little different from what a junior and a senior is going through. So they do have this now, and it's not an option. It's not a class, and it's not an elective. The entire school will participate in these. Then they'll go back to their classrooms, and then they'll have additional open discussions. Or, luckily they have enough counselors where if you just want to talk to a counselor, you could go talk to your counselor. So that is something great that I have seen that has changed, that, boy, you and me didn't have. And now I'm like, gracias a Dios. Like, because really, you're waiting until you're an adult and you're trying to raise a child. And it's like, what am I doing? Like, I wish I had that book when I was 23, and I was raising my son. I did not. I was like, okay, he's out. What do? We feed? You're not thinking about all these other things. But again, you learn, you grow, you educate yourself. And that's why I'm a better mother with my daughter, who's like 8 years apart than I was with my son, because I was like, something's got to give, something's got to change, and it has to start with me. It's incredible what is available out there to kids now. It's really good.
There is, Anna, and just to add that there's still a tremendous need. Not to disagree with you at all, especially in the higher education space with our college students. And Victor, thank you for sharing that for your, about your equal. There's still a tremendous disconnect with our college students, specifically our gente, in receiving mental health services. There's been a tremendous push around funding, providing resources to our campuses, community colleges, universities, both public, private. However, there's still a tremendous disconnect and gap for our students to receive and seek out. And that's just one factor. That doesn't, having the education again for our faculty, staff to advocate for our students to go seek out that level of support, from those resources, those services that are provided on campus, and then advocating for more and additional services to support our students. So Ana Lisa, thank you for sharing that at the early grade levels as well.
And yet, once you're a senior, and just like once you're an adult, nobody could force you to go to any of these things. When you're starting and you're in a younger class, you have to choose that you're going to get help. The same way I'm going to choose to make my annual appointment, to get seen. But guess what? When you go there, they're like, oh, by the way, you need to go see a specialist for your colonoscopy because I'm a certain age, and your mammogram and all these things. So when you're saying like you go to, it's great that you have a team, so you could go to Estefania, you could go to Nancy, and you work together to help someone out. It's the same way with your mental health. You might be like, oh, I think you need to see this person over here, but you need to take the step yourself. Nobody can force you to go to therapy. When you're in college, they let you know, hey, it's there, but you have to choose to show up. You have to choose to be there. And we have to make it okay for our kids to reach out for that help. Like, hey, like a lot of times we'd be walking around. I'm like, is this here? This is the center where they could come and get help. And over here, these are the snacks. Like, you need to make sure that you equate the importance of that mental health and, learning where the standard nurse's office is and everything else is. So it's not I went there and I don't know how you're going to feel about it kind of thing.
Oh, and I think a lot of what we hit upon, even in this conversation, we're talking about separate generations. But I'm curious to Mark's point, because what you're hitting on, we have this like, this is absolutely not an issue, and now these kids growing up with like a very different. But because I've been wanting to ask Victor, like he is so well versed, he's well read on mental health issues, but I'm bringing this up because he couldn't be here today, but like even Ratty Lopez, like he's brought it up recently. I think that there is this kind of gap that does exist. And this is what I wanted to ask Victor, is like, there's an awareness. We know the importance. We get it. We are advocates for it. But I don't know if there's still like a certain specific generation where there's either shame involved in it, or I get it, it's important, but I'm still not going to do it. And I think that's a very like niche point of like complete acknowledgement of how important this is, but also like a disconnect of why am I still not doing this? So I want to bring it back to Victor.
Yeah. I think, and it has to do with, some of the things that I brought up earlier, like you think through it and I'm like, ¿qué me van a decir? La verdad, o sea, because, and it's a discussion I've had with my wife, but in the sense that like, it's almost an extra. It's almost a nice to get done maybe. If I'm not making sales goals, then I don't have time to be worried about anything else. If I'm not, making very clear steps towards a particular promotion, and I'm seeing that is the thing that is stressing me the most. If I don't feel like I am doing enough to help support my retired parents, or helping my kids, it almost feels selfish. It almost feels like it would be nice to have the flexibility and the time to dedicate to that, but you've all sort of said it in a way, but yeah, it's a tool that will help me be better at achieving those things that I am trying to achieve, and it's not the first time I've heard it. Rachel, she is my wife. She is studying to become a therapist, and she's been just extremely graceful with, pushing me towards that. And so, yeah, I've always put it as a nice to have. And apparently I am so important that I don't have time to give it that much, that focus. And it's kind of funny because, and I first got onto the Peloton platform. I got a bike because I wanted to lose weight. I didn't really realize that at some point now I use it to like calm down, to make me feel better than I feel at any point in the day. That 30 minutes afterwards, I'm like, so I guess that's sort of mental health. But yeah, there is a disconnect for sure. And from understanding to actual action is a large ocean for sure.
It's that pre-contemplation moment where we are like, okay, there is a problem, but I don't want to acknowledge it. Question is, why don't you want to acknowledge it? What is behind that? Is it stigma? Is it shame? Is it I don't have the means or I can't find it? Because from what you're saying, I'll throw it back to you again. You found 30 minutes in your day to get on the bike and exercise. Why can't you find 30 minutes to get on a tele appointment with a therapist? Because it's as equally as important as your physical health. So I would wonder what's behind that.
You know what? This is not what this was about, okay? This is not about talking to people. We're gonna move on to the next question.
I
I am not going to be invited again. This is
like to circle back to the idea that maybe, just maybe, right? And as a therapist, I'm a big believer. If you're not ready, don't come to therapy then. You have to be ready, because if not, you're going to show up and say it didn't work.
Yeah.
I tried therapy
does
and it
ready
didn't
mean?
work.
What does ready mean?
So, and ready looks different in everybody, right? And I think, like we were talking about earlier, knowing and doing are two different things. And we think que nomás es un pasito, ahí nomás está a la orilla. But it's such a huge leap, and there's so many in between. So I'm gonna date myself here. Do you guys remember Super Mario Brothers? Well, Mario Brothers, the original Nintendo game. And in order for you to get from one side to another, había a level where there was like a bunch of little things, and you had to run so fast to cross, or else you would fall down the hole.
Yeah.
Yeah. So that's what we think we have to do. Let me just run across and do all the things you solo so I can get to the other side. We're not Super Mario Brother. We have to take each little in between and take our time and really calculate. And so it might mean going to therapy once a month, once every 2 weeks, once a week, whatever it is you need. And it's okay to take a break from therapy. It's okay, because we need it at different times in our lives. And I do want to say too that therapy is not the solution to it all, because these are things that we were doing way a long time ago. We were sitting in healing circles as a community. We were having pláticas just like we're having right now. What we're doing right now is healing. We are healing our communities by having this open discussion. So we don't need to always go to just a one-on-one. I think we should. I think everybody could benefit from therapy. And I think that's why PeLatinos and Peloton has created just a beautiful platform where we can heal together. Now let's take it up to the next level when you're ready, right? Is it going to a healing circle? Is it joining a meditation class, trying yoga, trying different things so that you start to learn yourself, like Mariana was saying earlier, so you can distinguish between, is this depression or is this just an off day? Is this a work thing or is this a me thing? And then if you still feel like, ooh, I don't think I can manage this on my own, now let me reach out to my therapist. Let me reach out to my support system. Ideally, that's what we want, is for you to have an organic support system that you can turn to, so that you're not leaning on your therapist all the time. Because my job is to eventually not have a job. I want to teach you the tools and create a community for you that you don't need me anymore. Am I going to be sad? Absolutely, I'm going to be sad. I think about my patients all the time, my clients, all of y'all. Pero a la misma vez, I want to see you thrive. I don't want to see you survive. I want to see you thrive.
Amen. Amen. Nancy, if I may add to that, I believe that we are in a, especially as gente de raza, from brothers and sisters, that we are in a state of healing. It is a journey from generational trauma, childhood trauma, professional and personal traumas that we are navigating, that we are in a state of healing. And whether the modalities are Peloton, a community, a plática, calling a homie up, whatever that space that we need, if it is our therapist, our go-to, that is what we need in that moment. And believing, that the space that PeLatinos have created, early on, to find, as movement as medicina here, believing and focusing on that mental well-being through movement. And while I am an advocate, staunch advocate of mental wellness, mental health, and really trying to role model for my brothers and sisters, blood and community related, that it's okay to be vocal and to seek out that support, but that to role model that, hey, I'm doing this too. I'm going to be vocal about it. I'm going to share my experience with you so we can break down that stigma. We can break down and show others that as brown men that, hey, we can be okay not being okay, and going out and seeking support that we need, whatever that modality is that we need at that time, therapy, Peloton, community, etc. So thank you for stating that.
Yeah, and for
I
a minute,
was saying like,
for a minute, it's
sorry,
definitely
go ahead, Victor.
yeah, it's definitely got, because for so long, I think so many of my contemporaries, so many that were in my same career path, the way we, I think, sort of soothed was getting together, not talking about anything more important than soccer, and drinking. And that's it. And then just drinking, and then, you know what? Drinking again, and just numbing, I guess, and never addressing shit.
It's ridiculous. And that's what I was going to say. There's a lot of times when you're like, oh, I've had a hell of a day. I need a drink. Do you?
Yeah.
I mean, right. And that's not what it should be. You should, and this is, so for me, you have to get to the point where you're starting to be reflective. Like, I'm too old not to be reflecting on the way that I would behave with certain people, on, my reaction to others doing something. And that's when I take a step back and I'm like, this is what I need help with, because I cannot help myself through that. And that's when you see a therapist, and it could be, you could start once a month and kind of just get the conversation started. The same way you're like, hey, I'll meet you at happy hour. You'd be like, hey, I got an appointment in an hour, and it's going to make me feel better at the end of the day. And I guarantee you it does, because once you're done with the drinking, guess what? You're like, oh, you're back at it, and you haven't addressed the issue, the stress, the whatever it is that got you to that point. I think that's why a lot of us, during the pandemic, we're like, oh, I don't know. You're home, you're stressed, you're dealing with like all these. It's like, no, there are other ways or other avenues for you to deal with the way that you're feeling. And therapy is a great way to get there and to kind of get past that. And I will tell you,
therapy in addition, and I want to just maybe, because sometimes immediately we go into, what can I take off? What's bad for me? What if we just added things so that then so for example, what if you decided, before I start to drink, before I go have a beer, let me go ahead and do a meditation, or let me do some breathing. And then if I still want to have the beer, I'll have the beer. Or let me grab my journal while I drink my wine. So it slows down your drinking, but it also gives you a moment for you to reflect.
Mm-hmm.
And then now you actually have something to talk about in therapy, if you decide to go to therapy. Porque inmediatamente you think that that's what I'm going to tell you, or what Estefania is going to tell you, take this off of your life. And that's why a lot of people don't want to come either, because you don't want to hear that.
Right.
But
right.
let me
Like
just
change, like change.
you can add.
Yeah,
Yes.
It's creating that awareness of what is sparking this behavior, and why am I doing it? Why can I change it? And to Nancy's point a little bit further, they said, okay, yeah, you can start with therapy once a month, but it's also, remember, we don't have any expectations as people, as patients. You're stepping in here to tell us something. I'm not expecting A, B, and C from you. I'm not here to judge you. You're here to tell me something, or what's happening that you need help. So I think there's also that situation. It is a little bit more of my own personal history. I have my own therapy, thank God. And it's something I dread going, because I know I have to work on things. It's not nice.
It's scary. It's scary to think that you have to confront some of the things maybe you already know about yourself.
Yeah, or actually the person who you're seeing is actually bringing it to light. And I'm like, oh, the light bulb. Right. But it's like, now I have to do this and that to solve this and that, because we can, as Nancy was saying, we cannot just tell you, hey, stop talking to this person in your life, or stop doing that, or make this person go away, because that's the person that's causing the issue. Like, no, I mean, we can teach you tools, and you need to learn to manage them and then anything. But again, therapy is not necessarily fun. You have to have that space. You have to have that. I need the help. I want to go. And I need to put the work. I need to put the sweat. Like we put the sweat in our runs, in our bikes, and everything. We need to do that too for therapy.
Oh, and it's an ongoing also. I'm even seeing it with my mom now, because she decided to go, and it was something specific. And she's like, I just feel like I'm harping on. And I remind her, I was like, you can talk about other things. Like, there's other things that happen in your life, and they might sound trite to you, but by you bringing them up, and just the daily, like whether it's a conversation with my dad, or other ones of us or your grandchildren, like certain things will start to, you never know. Because even like a couple of months ago, I was just like, I have nothing to talk about. Like, I didn't know what I wanted. And just in having a conversation, something came up and it was like really like a light bulb moment to your point. I was like, oh, like certain things will start to surface the more that you give way, that it doesn't have to, like, you go in on with one agenda.
Yeah.
Like it's an ever evolving, moving thing. So my breakup with my ex was like what led me to therapy, but like we don't talk about him anymore. You know, it's a different thing.
I do, want to, maybe take a little bit of a shift. And I'm not sure, Mariana, you caught this earlier, but there is apparently a huge issue with, young Latina women between 18 and 34 and suicide. I think I have like, if I, in my mind, the image of a modern Latina who sort of falls into that category, something tells me that there is a special amount of anxiety or pressure on that person that maybe some others don't, experience. Because I feel like if you're the youngest daughter in a family, in a family from immigrants, there's an extra special amount of, pressure on you, because not only do you have to have education, career, then you better be getting married, and you better be having kids, and then remember, you're going to take care of your parents. Just saying all that feels like terribly overwhelming. But can you speak a little bit about the unique sort of experiences that Latina women are having today?
I mean, it's funny you talk about the pressure of the little one. I was like, where's the middle child syndrome in this? Because I started that as my
Well, all middle children are messed up anyway. We all know that. So
I was like, I never felt seen in my family, so I guess that's why I'm here. But
you put yourself in front of millions.
yeah, I was like, no, that's why I tell my parents all the time, because this goes back to a lot of what we were talking about earlier. They did the best with what they had and there are things that I've brought up to them, and there are things that I'm really grateful at this point as an adult now knowing. And then things that came up when I was an adolescent that I was like, what? Like, I'm clearly working through this. And, there were 4 of us, and my mom was just like trying to survive. And I was like, how do I stand out? And like, I ended up in theater, and then, that's a different story. But I do, when you read that, you said that statistic, it, like, I felt a sucker punch because being in that time frame and having been in a really difficult place, when sometimes there is like circumstances attached to your upbringing. There's, you had to come out of the woods or overcome certain things. But I also came from a place of a lot of privilege. So it was like, why the hell am I feeling like I don't want to wake up tomorrow? Like, what? Why? Why is that something? Like, how did I get here?
Yeah.
Because there's a lot of good, and I can objectively recognize it. And so I don't know, like, I don't, beyond going into diagnosis, like, is it a personal thing? Is it just a chemical imbalance? Is it also, to Anna's point of like getting to rock bottom with something that was just like the wake up call of like, so with the statistic, I'm curious to see like where all they land or what the nuances are, because you said it and I was like, damn, like, and there's no easy fix, but I wonder why.
Yeah, I think right. The expectations, a lot of us are living behind screens and seeing, and everyone always shows the happy path to everything. Oh, I'm doing great in school. I'm doing great in work, and I have all these friends, and I'm having so much fun. You hardly ever see the struggles that people go through.
Mm.
So when you're, and in my 20s is when I grew the most. That is when you're really discovering who you are as a person, as a woman. And when you're feeling like you're not measuring up to your peers because you're really focused on the social media, and then the added pressures, because with my mom, you have to be the martyr. No, pues es que lo que hace una mujer. Like you have to be taking all these things on, and it's the expectation that you're doing everything, and that you have to be successful in everything. Where for me, like I wasn't seeing everyone else succeed in everything that they were doing, be the perfect mom, the perfect wife, the perfect employee. And now that's all you see on social media. You see all these influencers, and that just, I feel that happens to be that age range where a lot of these people are looking at a lot of that, and they can't see themselves there. And if you're not successful, then, I mean, I saw this a lot, in Korea when I lived there. There was a lot of very young professionals that were taking their lives because of the stress, that they could really not live up to the expectations of the family. And they're very much like us. You take care of the family. But I mean, the similarities were amazing, and that's why I loved living there. I really felt like I was at home, even though I was thousands of miles away. But the pressure on not just the young women, but the young men and the professionals, because it's that pressure that you feel to be something that you can't be. And it's, if you're not getting to that perceived success, it's just the worst. And I mean, you had like multimillionaires that were taking their lives because of that. I mean, it literally was everywhere. You didn't get into school, that's it, you're done for. Over there, it's like the one school, and if you're not in, you're not in. It's so many things that we have out there that we don't think are putting pressure on ourselves. And why do I feel that way? Why am I, internalizing someone else's success? It's all sorts of things that I think it could be. And I mean, it's sad. It truly is sad. But that generation, unfortunately, is the one that has been living behind the screens and on, the social media, everything from, what was that one? MySpace. I think I was just right past the MySpace, but that's when it started. They went from MySpace to like Facebook and the Snapchats and TikTok now and everything in between. It's tough. It's very, very tough to measure up to.
And I feel like it's going to get worse, because now not only do we have real people sort of faking perfect lives and giving these images, but AI will now begin generating even more of this content to that sort of right shows pure perfection. So that definitely even more pressure, more dangerous.
Expectations, right? We live to wanting to please somebody else's expectations instead of our own. Okay, expectation is a woman now in this age range. You have to have a career, staff kids, be the perfect mom, have a household. No, that's society's expectations. What you want is, what are your expectations for yourself? Not my mom's, not my dad's, not my siblings. And I think that's something that even outside the Latino community, that's something that I think everybody struggles with. At each culture with their own expectations too. And it's something we need to just be rid of and just free. Like, this is what I want for myself. If it's whatever you want, doesn't matter. And I've learned that the hard way. You can pivot. You can flow like water. Otherwise, being rigid is not going to get you anywhere. And expectation can change with years, with wisdom, with what you're doing, where you're living.
But what you're saying, Estefania, is interesting. Sorry, just on that point, because I think, especially if we talk about culturally, like, there's so many things that attach us back that you want to keep. And I even see it from the nuance of like going back to see my family in San Diego and the life that they, and like, grass is always greener, of like, I chose this, but there's this, and like there's this constant wavering back and forth of like an attachment and of recreating and upholding.
Right. But
So like
it's almost an extra. It's almost a nice to get done, maybe. If I'm not sales brothers, I have that. It's an extra. It's nice to get done. That's coming from. Trying to figure it out. It's almost like a replay of what.
Yeah.
It's weird. Okay.
Yeah, Mariana, my to that point, going home to Phoenix, and my mom loved her to death. She's still, I'm like, okay, Ma, okay, I'll consider it. Thank you. I'll consider it.
I'll check the list.
I wanted to touch back a little bit on like going back home, but also expectations. And I think this is what therapy helps us kind of reinforce in us, is that we come from collective communities. We want to still make our families proud, our cultures proud. And I hear it all the time, especially with first gen and second gen, is that, our parents came this far, so I have to get that PhD. I have to get this. So where can we find that happy medium, right? Where can we find where both expectations, or not even expectation, where both desires of the heart, of the soul, can come together, and you can still make your culture proud and make yourself proud, so that you're not completely swinging the pendulum over into the other way. And I think that's what's driving a lot of the suicide rates, is we think all or nothing. I have to either, we have to please our family, or, F my family, I'm going to please and do whatever I want. And neither of those things is going to bring us the joy that we're seeking. So really finding that happy medium. And back to the suicide question, I think we get to that point because the reality is, we have all had that thought of, I don't want to be here anymore. And the reality is like, why would you want to be? I think about 2024. Why would I want to be here in a world where it's hard to be a brown woman, right? Where I'm constantly, the autonomy of my body is constantly in question in courts, where, what I should be doing is being dictated by everyone else except myself. Yeah, I wouldn't want to be here either. So I think, again, back to education, educating people on the different levels of suicidality and suicide ideation, so that you can get help before you get to that point of an actual suicide attempt. And the reminder for those who think that there is a stigma to that, just because you bring that to therapy to somebody like myself or Estefania, that doesn't mean we're going to put you in the hospital right away. We're going to walk you through this process. We're going to make sure that you are safe, because the hospital is actually the last resource when we really think that there is a severe safety concern. That's why family systems are so important. Who can we call? What friends do you have? Do I need to call you every morning to make sure that you are still with us? Because sometimes that's just what somebody needs until we can get you out of this dark hole, and we can get your mind to start changing those thoughts of not wanting to be here to being here, so you can strive and thrive.
Thank you for that, Nancy. Again, just to add, this journey that I am on personally on my mental wellness, I still have my cloudy days. I want to be in a space of thriving. I want to be a space of shining and shining my light with others. And I know how important it is to role model and normalize these conversations that we're having, especially for our brown sisters and brothers, those that are, in our village, in our community, our circles, that we are having these conversations. Continue to advocate, but also role modeling. Like, look, this is what I'm going through, and this is who I'm talking to in order to get to this space of thriving. Again, I know it's there. I've seen it. You can do it. I've been there with you, but let's get you there. How can I help you? How can we do this together in this journey of healing together? So thank you. Thank you for adding that.
And I think as parents, we need to see how we can do better with our kids. I personally, and Mark brought this up with your mom's like, well, what about a law degree? And Nancy brought it up too. Well, why not this and the success? I had a very vivid conversation with my son, and I kept on, oh, well, you have to have this job, and you have to make this much money, and you have to do this. Like, I was putting all this pressure on him, and he's the oldest, so he feels a different kind of pressure, like to be the one to kind of like represent and really like do what he needs to do. And he looked at me and he's like, maybe I don't want everything that you have. Maybe I just want a simpler life. I was like, oh, mind blown. That I'm like, I've worked so hard. Like, I'm like my parents, right? I walked in the snow for 50. But for me, God, like the next generation has to be better and has to do better and has to be like more successful. And everyone's level of success is different, and everyone, how they want to live is different. And that was so important. When he told me that, I was like, got you. You do what you do, boo-boo. Like, continue with whatever makes you happy. But the kind of life that you want to have. Try to get to that. If you need my support, I'm here for you. But me, I was pushing him like, oh, well, when are you going to get a law degree? Same thing. Like, oh, you have to do this, and you have to go and get your master's, and you have to do this. And he's like, no, that's not what's going to make me happy at the end of the day. And I had to recognize that and be like, okay, let me get off my little soapbox about how you have to keep doing better and being, because again, it was my expectations on him. And that is really, really hard as parents to not put our expectations and our additional pressure on our children. And gracias a Dios, he probably went to see his therapist. He's like, this crazy woman over here, she's putting her expectations on me. But I think now that he has someone that he sees that he's comfortable with, that will make him a better parent. I wish I had that, when I was young, that I felt that I could do that and talk to someone about all of these things, all the pressures that I felt, being the invisible middle child, and how I felt like I had to stand out and kind of talk to all that there. So it's just, we need to make sure that we recognize what our family did to us, and then we have to do better with our kids and the younger generation. Because believe you me, Mariana, when all your littles see you out there they really register that, like all of your nieces and nephews, they are seeing that and they're like, that is great. It's amazing how much our kids mirror what we do. It's incredible. So just remember that when you're talking and you're just giving a comment about, no, pues ese está loco, your kids are really internalizing all of that. And a lot of times it's why they don't want to go to therapy and get the care that they need, because they feel that they're going to be judged by us. And I've always said these 4 walls should be the safest 4 walls where you feel like you could come and ask for anything. And we're there to support you every step of the way with whatever it is, school, mental health, physical health, whatever. Like that's what we're here for.
Wow. Well, guys, we are at time, but I gotta say that this met every possible expectation I could have possibly had on how this conversation went. I didn't expect to get so deep into me, but I have to tell you that I feel smarter about it and I feel more open about it. And funny enough, Mariana, you said something just a little while ago when you talked about you came from a place of privilege and how could I be feeling this, and you really touched on something that really made click the switch for me, because I have felt so many times, how dare I, it's this, how dare I feel down, and I can, it's weird how I can almost catch myself thinking back and how many times I've ridiculed myself, and when I don't want to work out, it's because you're just a punk, and just beating myself up about it, and then second guessing myself. So I'm going to meditate on it more. I know I will get on it and we'll do that work. And we've got so much more on this, I don't know if you guys caught, but that I did mention, maybe we can talk about imposter syndrome, and Nancy corrected me. She's like, hey, hell no. Imposter syndrome takes a 2-day session in a conference room, especially Latino imposter syndrome. So maybe that's something that we take up on the next one, but this has been absolutely awesome. I'm so glad you could all join. Thank you so much for taking the time. It's recorded. Please go to our YouTube channel, share it anywhere that you guys want. I think it's really, really valuable.
Thank you, Victor.
Thank you, Victor.
Thank you.
Thank you guys.
Gracias, Victor. Gracias.
No, that's
for the
Yeah, thank you
space.
for the space, guys.
Bye-bye.
No, but